Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy, Mr. Soul Effect, Shotty from the R&B Talk Show. This episode right here, I'm talking about DeBarge's solo career. You know, it's funny how when we think about DeBarge, we think about stuff he did with his brothers and sisters, DeBarge, but we never talk about much of his solo career. And I'm gonna tell you the reason why we don't talk about it as much, because Motown has failed him. No disrespect to Berry Gordy, but he has failed DeBarge all the way. And it makes you wonder what could have been. Because if you look at DeBarge's interview on Halftime Chat, big shouts to Dio up in the UK. And DeBarge, you know, he broke it all down, you know, everything that went wrong in Motown, you know, during those last, 3 years of being there, put out 2 solo albums and stuff. Because let me tell you something, his 7th debut album, DeBarge could have went, 3 or 4 times platinum, probably 10 million. Second album, Gemini, that could have sold as much as well, and let me tell you something, DeBarge's pen game is incredible, I was shocked that DeBarge not even a songwriter Hall of Fame and stuff he did with, DeBarge as well as his solo stuff, but politics and BS and everything. And I feel sorry for the brother though, because I felt like, that he was being led on, when Berry Gordy promised him everything and pretty much, kicked it to the side. Because around that time, Berry Gordy, he was focused on movies and other businesses, and, he lost interest of his own label, Motown. Because around that time, we started seeing a decline of, chart topping from, it was Stevie Wonder, Smokey Robinson, Lionel Richie disappeared, and at that time, it just brought back Diana Ross, but it didn't really, do too much, in my opinion, and stuff like that, But, in the midst of all that, in 1989, he was featured in Quincy Jones' compilation album Back on the Block with the #1 R&B hit Sticker Garden that featured James Ingram, Al B. Shore, and Barry White around that time. And at that time, so that put Barry White back in the forefront, to have another #1 R&B hit, because he had #1 R&B hit since like the 70s, and that's crazy, just go like at the time 2 decades without a top #1 R&B hit record. At that time, Al B. Shore was still on fire, to have, 2 albums, #1 R&B hits, 2 back-to-back platinum albums and everything. And at that time, Al B. Shore was the go-to guy, he did songs with Heavy D and, Al Green and the list goes on and stuff like that. And especially with James Ingram, James Ingram was that go-to guy, this songs, writing songs for Michael Jackson and so many others and stuff, and plus at that time, he was already on fire too, with his #1 pop hit, I Don't Have a Heart, which is one of the greatest R&B records, of all time and stuff. But I felt like Sticker Garden should have won a Grammy, in my opinion, but at the same time too, that was the first time we seen DeBarge get nominated for a Grammy, so that was a great look, for the brother. But there was a story behind that, what was it, that Michael Jackson was supposed to be featured in it though, but I don't know if he was or not, but that's a whole different story for another time. But this song right here pretty much let people know that, hey, regardless of people, anybody say, I'm saying, I'm still in the game. And with that song, Sticker Garden, it pretty much showed what DeBarge can do, as a great solo artist and stuff like that, what I'm saying? And, for me, I thought to myself, like, to me, that's a timeless record. It's one thing you got to hit. When you got a song that's like a forever timeless, it stands alone and stuff. And that song right there would never be touched, And big shouts to Quincy Jones requesting DeBarge be part of a great song and stuff. But like I said, that song should have won a Grammy. But also, too, I felt personally that with DeBarge, James Ingram, Barry White, Al B. Shore, that could have been a 4-man group, believe it or not, man. They could have put an album out back in 91, man, because they worked so well together, man. And I thought to myself, like, dang, man, here it is. That song is dominating every single Quiet Storm radio at that time. And I'm like, damn, how come they're not a Superman group, But who knows what could have been, if Barry White was alive and James Ingram was alive and stuff. And I thought to myself, like, dang, man, we missed out on something that could have had happened. But, say life has its own plans and everything. It is funny too, because around this time you do put out In a Storm, a great album, You know, saying the album could have done a whole lot of what it's supposed to do. Then the next album he signed for Warner, the next album he did for Warner Brothers, Hard, Mind, and Soul. And I'm going to tell you what's so funny about that. Here it is. DeBarge worked with Jermaine Dupri and Babyface. And you would think that Motown would have had, no, not Motown, you would think that Warner Brothers would have had, put a lot of heavy marketing on that album. Because here it is, Babyface at the time, one of the hottest producers, back in the 90s, because he produced, Tony Braxton, Bobby Brown, Tevin Campbell, a handful of people, man. And you would think that Warner Brothers would have marketed, his album and stuff, but it was, once again, was a hit and miss and stuff. And I never understood that, man. How can you sit here and only half-ass a brother, that has a great platinum voice, that can give you the best. You just want to treat him like a side chick. Because to tell you the truth, right this time, Warner Brothers was starting to slowly change because, they fired all the black R&B departments around that time. And then, too, on top of that, we started seeing the decline of Prince, Tevin Campbell, and everybody else. It's like they signed black artists, but at the same time, too, they not put a lot of energy into the black artists. But you want to sit here and hire pop departments. That's the reason why these labels folded, because I think like this, keep the departments over there, but make sure, if you want to sit here and hire a pop department, keep the black department. So make sure the black departments take care of the R&B and hip hop. That's what it's there for, but a bunch of BS, man. Saying straight up. So, songs like, Where's My Love, Can't Get Enough, Slide, and Where You Are. Now, Where You Are could have been a number one R&B hit, man. I'm going to tell you that straight up. That could have been number one R&B hit, and that was a classic, man. And I never understood why that song got slept on, so bad. And I thought about myself, okay, it makes sense that Warner Brothers half-ass, DeBarge, like, how can y'all sit here and signed him after he did a song with Quincy Jones, but did him dirty after he signed a 2-album deal with you guys? And that's when the whole frustration started to begin for DeBarge. By that time, did he still want to do music or not? And thank God for DJ Quik, he saved DeBarge, and then DeBarge started doing songs for DJ Quik off his album and everything else. So from there, he just kept it coasting. Now, from that point, he put out an album called Second Chance, put out 2 singles called the self-titled Second Chance, and Lay With You was with Faith Evans. Now, I'm going to say this, once again, even though he had great marketing, Capitol Records did a good job and stuff, but I felt like they didn't really put a whole lot into, DeBarge, because, they gave him 2 videos and stuff like that, but I felt like, they could do more for him, but Capitol Records, they just failed him altogether. But it's crazy. Like I said, I think I might have said at the beginning of this video is that, it's crazy how DeBarge, sings all the songs he did with his group, DeBarge, for the concerts. Like of course he's supposed to, because that's part of his legacy of DeBarge. He paid homage to his brother, Bobby DeBarge, but he never sings a handful of songs, of his solo albums that he put out, from 89 to 1984, and then even 2010. And I wish that DeBarge could sing a handful of, all of his classics, because DeBarge got some hot joints and everything, even though L, talked about it on Halftime Chat, but I wish that L could have, sing, Who's Johnny, Someone, Real Love, and, so forth, and I wish that he could do that, because if you notice, like almost every Black-owned award show and all these other, appearances he does, of course, the concerts that he performs a lot of, DeBarge records, and he pay homage to his brother Bobby, but he never really sing majority of his solo records. So that's why I say that hopefully one day he does do that. And plus, he's about to go on tour with Charlie Wilson, KC, and I forgot the other brother's name. And, so he's supposed to be doing that. So hopefully, he does perform some of his solo joints and stuff like that, because fans want to hear, especially like the diehard L fans, that loves everything he puts out and stuff, So with that being said, your boy been Solo Effect and Shotty for the R&B Talk Show. Thank you all for checking out this video over here. Make sure you guys like, comment, and share. And I thought to myself, like, why not talk about this? Because this right here was definitely needed, majority of anything. So with that being said, I'm out, y'all.